Such a good episode with Moot.
I am so excited about this episode. It's a new format for us, How Good Gets Good, where we're going to interview brands about all the amazing things that they're doing in a particular category. This week, it's going to be about alphas. And you know, if you listened or read my 2025 predictions, that I am huge on the concept of alpha zones. I really think they're an amazing space, and I can't wait to get into it with the founders, Cheryl and Paul.
Yeah. And they dropped some amazing bits of wisdom all in all of history. Banning something has never worked. Building with them and alongside with them versus just for them. Trust and empower, inclusivity, amazing set of kind of brand values and what they're creating. So tune in.
Yeah, enjoy.
Hey everyone, it's Chris.
And Kirsten.
Welcome to Good Thinking Weekly, the podcast where we discuss the best of the best in brands, marketing, and culture.
Thousands of people, top execs from the likes of Complex, Klaviyo, Walmart, Wall Street Journal, and LVMH tune in every single week.
We run a creative consultancy in Good Co, so we know what it takes to build a good brand.
Subscribe on YouTube, your favorite podcast app, and Good Thinking on Substack for more.
All right, let's dive in.
Okay, we are so excited. We're launching a new podcast addition to our podcast, How Good Got Good, and we couldn't be more excited. It's really about kind of digging deep, really understanding a brand, a campaign, really what's happening, kind of ever wonder how on earth the magic happened. If you work for brands, likely you said, how the fuck did they pull that off? And how did the sausage get made? And so that's really what we're digging into. What's the secret sauce? And this week in our inaugural How Good Gets Good, we're talking to Moot. Chris, you want to tell us why we're talking to Moot?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, welcome back. Like you're, stateside again in, shoulder pads. So, I'm sure you're missing Panama. But yeah, I would love, yeah. I mean, so we've been talking about creating this series for a while, right? Like How Good Gets Good is something that we've been developing. If you're a brand that wants to do this, please shout out or drop a brand in the comments. But the thinking behind it is like, sometimes you just wonder, like, how did this company come to be, right? Big or small. Like it could be a company, it could be a campaign, right? And you want to know, like, A, how they're thinking, but B, like, what was the process and like, how did they become successful and like, what are they doing to stay and, become more successful, right? And I've been thinking a lot about this. I want to talk to brands about specific campaigns they're doing, if they're established brands and new brands. And I've been, this has been living in the back of my mind, taking up space as like most ideas do. And then I was on LinkedIn, as I often am, and I saw somebody post about this brand called Moot. And I was like, it was like a stop you in your tracks kind of thing, like where you're like, oh, like, what's that? Oh, like, A, the brand is kind of like attention catching. The brand is like very pink and it's, it's got this like fun vibe. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I read further and it was talking about how this brand out of the UK is creating basically a social club for teenagers, by teenagers, like designed by teenagers for teenagers, a place for them to hang out. And we've talked about this so much, like I've talked about it in my 2025 predictions about how I think alpha zones, like I've given the example. And alphas range, right? So they're not always teenagers, they're younger, but like super awesome is another one that I think could become like creating spaces that are made for these groups. It's not only like a good idea, but it's needed. Like society is desperate for these, especially moms, especially teens, especially kids. Like they want to be welcomed. And when I saw this space and I saw these people and I was like, and I looked at them and they have a background, in marketing and they worked at Adam and Eve and all these cool things. I was like, these people have got it figured out and I want to talk to them. So I slid into Cheryl's DMs pretty late at night, probably, because that's kind of how I'm, scrolling through LinkedIn. Like while you might be sliding into people's DMs in a different way, I am there being like, hi, would you like to tell me about why you're building your brand? And like, can you tell me, would you be willing to answer some obscure questions if I send them to you? And she was super willing. And so I'll include, the contents of some of that, the written gems. But then we asked them to come on the podcast and be kind of our first guests. And, I think it's a really like we'll talk about sort of the conversation that we've had, but like they bring up, a lot of things. And one of the things that I think is the most critical takeaway for me is that for a really long time now, we have all been societally creating this stereotype of an alpha. And then we talk about creating stereotypes and branding all the time, right? Like how everybody is niche and da 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 da, and you can't have a muse anymore. But we have created this group of people, these teenagers, who are like to be feared, to be kind of loathed, to be treated almost like lepers. And we're not like making spaces for them yet. We want them to thrive. We want them to become great. We want them to do all these things. And parents are desperate for this. And what's so interesting about Moot is it's paid for by the parents. It's basically like, I think of it as like the cool Soho house for teenagers, right? And your parents are footing the bill. And I would predict that there would be one of these in every city, like a desire for it anyway, in every city. And I think the way they get there is through brand partnerships. And I actually think that brands could look at a thing like this and see it as an opportunity. How often do you really get to interact with the teenagers that you're actually selling to? And that's hard to do. But I think that it really is an opportunity for brands, not just to look at. So I think a brand should be looking at this business model of like, me, and I really want Starbucks to create an alpha.
I know you do.
I really want it to happen.
I know you do. Yeah.
And I think similarly, it could follow a similar model of like a membership model, like where you get this many coffees a month, whatever it is. Like, I think there could be a way to like kind of incentivize it. But I think that there's that. And then I also think there's a real opportunity with this particular brand for other brands to engage with teenagers in a cool and interesting way and become beloved. And I think it's a really interesting thing that they're building. So I was really grateful that Paul, the co-founder, and Cheryl were willing to come on the podcast and tell us all about it. And so I asked them some questions, you asked them some questions, and we get into like some, fun quick fire things and talk about it all.
Yeah. And they're really great. I think they gave a lot of kind of a playbook as far as, creating a brand for and with alphas. Spoiler alert. Not just for them, but actually with them. And I think it came up for me, the intentionality that we talked about a lot about last week. Like their intention and their expectation is that these kids are, doing the things that teenagers are doing, but also rising above and like being respectful and enjoying the space and all of those things. And I think they're seeing that happen because of that intention. And I think, for us to have Moot on as the first on this podcast is kind of perfect, because part of what we want to do is highlight those brands that are really doing something that's different, really kind of unearthing that, and ultimately to inspire others. And I think there's no better example.
All right. I hope everyone enjoys the interview, and drop in the comments if you're a brand who wants to partner with them. Like, would feel very proud and excited if anyone comes out of this and says yes, because I think you should be. But B, tell us what you think about alpha zones, and like if you think that this is really a space that brands should be playing, because obviously I'm passionate about it, but that's just one perspective.
Yeah. And if you're a brand that wants to be on the podcast, let us know.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you, Cheryl, Paul. Kristen, I know you, so not meeting you for the first time.
Good to meet you, Kristen.
Yeah, I'm so inspired what you're doing. It's really, really exciting. I just want to kind of give everyone a little context about who you are and what I think you're doing. But then after that, I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell us exactly what you are building. So I came across Cheryl on LinkedIn. She was writing about the company that they're building called Moot. And you tell me if that's how you say it. But one of the things that really stood out to me is that you guys are building, from what I understand, a members club for alphas, right? For teens, for teenagers, specifically made for them, by them, with them in mind. The opposite of what I would say the majority of brands are doing today, an extremely needed service, I would say, but like also brand and ethos in this landscape today. So yeah, would love for you to introduce what you're building and who you are, and then let's get into some fun questions about how you're doing it.
Go on, Cheryl.
We never. It's really awkward because people do this question, and we never know who's to speak first, and then you get this weird well, I did it last time. No, I don't feel like it today.
We know the feeling.
You must get it all the time. So I will slightly introduce both of us because it's also easier than doing a long double intro. So I'm Cheryl, and this gentleman is Paul. We're both ex sort of marketeers, industry folk. So we come from the world of brands and businesses. We met 10 years ago when I was what agencies called a client, what I just call a business person. And Paul was my managing partner at the advertising agency we worked with, which was Adam and Eve. So that's 10 years ago, and we spent 10 years doing lots of advertising and building brands and building businesses, and I ended up as a CEO, and Paul ended up as the managing director. And then about 2.5 years ago now, 3 years ago, we started talking about what we might do, which was a bit better for society and a bit better for our souls and a bit better for the stories to tell our grandkids than, I don't know, I think Paul was making John Lewis adverts and I was selling mattresses.
Good adverts, good mattresses, but there still seems like there might be something more, just something out there.
Love that.
And we both had at that time, kids approaching teenager. I now have a teenager, and Paul has an almost teenager. And in amongst all the madness of life, the one thing we really noticed was this massive shift in what was going on in parents' minds and in the surround sound as your sort of delightful little children that had gone to play dates and ballet, and it was all about, after school pickups and ice creams, suddenly hit the teenage years. And suddenly the conversation went from, after school pickups and ice creams to, I seem to have lost them. I seem to have lost them to their phones. I seem to have lost them to their bedroom. They seem to be deeply unhappy. They seem to be lonely. And in many cases, they're struggling, right? They're struggling with their mental health. And Paul and I were going, where do we want to take ourselves in our lives, which is a bit more purpose-driven and which is going to have a great impact? And then this thing came out from the side, right? We just couldn't move for all these conversations shifting. And the social dilemma had come out, and Kate Winslet with I Am Ruth, and wherever we looked, we could just hear this noise about teenagers and what we're seeing teenagers were suffering. And everyone was talking about smartphones. Everyone was going, look, we need to ban smartphones. And in all of history, banning something has rarely been the solution for a fundamental societal problem. And Paul and I were looking at our own teenagers and listening to our own the parents of other teenagers and listening to the problem, which was, yes, smartphones, but more than that was that there was nowhere for them to go to be together once they stopped being under your wings, right? Once they stopped being little things that you were ferrying around to brownies, and they wanted to go on their own, there was nowhere for them to go. And so they ended up, either somewhere pretty miserable, park, which parents don't want them at, which is pretty unsafe, wandering around the streets, or they end up in their bedrooms, holed up on TikTok, on Insta, endless gaming, online gaming, and living this sort of proxy of a social life, this like digital facsimile of a social life. And so amongst all this conversation about smartphones and we just need to ban smartphones, actually the reality is, as Paul and I sat there, was what are the spaces that teenagers are meant to go to be together that smartphones are competing with, because those spaces don't exist. And that was Sephora. Sephora, great. That's really good for 25 minutes if you're a girl of a certain age.
Exactly.
But so few brands even do what Sephora. So few brands were doing what Sephora has done, and welcome teenagers. Every brand is literally working to design teenagers out of their space, right? It's literally like we want children because their parents spend lots of money and children are adorable. We want adults because they've got loads of money, particularly young adults. It's all disposable income. Teenagers, no, we don't want them. They are, they're knife wielding, I don't know, lepers. Brilliant word from you guys earlier. So that was the genesis of the business, which at that time we called the Den, which has gone through some evolution, and which I think, Paul, we were sitting in your back garden with a bottle of wine talking about all this when the idea came about, wasn't it?
The best ideas come out over wine.
We know this to be true.
Yeah. And I think as we sat there coaxing the best idea out of the bottle, which is always a tricky and delicate process, I think that there's something that really dawned on us is we sort of went back to looking at all the places, and we're both quite social animals, I think. And we went back to look back at our childhoods and look back to all the places that children and teenagers used to hang out when we were younger. And we had this very strange realization that most of those have vanished. So whether that's youth clubs, leisure centers, lots of the retail experiences that we used to, go to, have also vanished from the high streets, just largely post-COVID. Just a lot of that's closed down. Pubs, we used to go, underage drinking was highly fashionable and largely encouraged by most of the pubs on this side of the pond. So there were all these spaces that we used to go to that no longer existed. And we realized, I think we had a real moment of realization that we've managed to engineer teenagers out of society. And government has largely encouraged that because teenagers don't vote. So in times of cost of living crisis, if there's one person you can squeeze, it's a teenager. And lots of other people just go to Cheryl's point, going, commercial ventures tend to go, they don't have money. And for some reason, we've created this sort of toxic avatar of a teenager, which is a sort of, I don't know, vaping, zombie knife wielding, profane, fornicating beast. That's it's really odd. And so they really struggle to go somewhere where they're welcomed and accepted and treated like the sort of adults in waiting that they are. So that was that was the sort of genesis of it all, I think.
Amazing. Yeah, I think you're right. Like, I think ultimately that's kind of the feeling that I've been having, is that the need for this, the opportunity for it is there, the desire is there, the teens want it, parents want it, society wants somewhere for them to go to. Like, no one's feeling comfortable when they walk by a group of 15 teenagers like in the park. No, that doesn't make anyone feel comfortable. Kirsten's kid like roaming around on his e-bike, running away from security guards doesn't make me happy either. Like, I'm not excited about that for him, for me, for anyone who's in the way. So I think it's just so it's so spot on that, like, I think that we really all want this, but no one has kind of taken it and pulled it out, right? Like, and I think that's what you guys are doing. That's why I was excited, is that like somebody's actually putting their money and their ideas and their efforts and their thing and making something. So tell me, like, and this is something that I asked you in writing over email, was like, tell me how you build a space for alphas that is welcoming, that is sanctioned, that is okay, and don't make it uncool. Because that seems like everything. I don't have a teenager. I have a 5-year-old, so we're still in our ballet phase, but hanging out with Kirsten's kids, who are, I would say like my small stepchildren, who are now much taller than me, it's like they don't want to do anything that like we suggest. Like, if I told them to go somewhere, they'd be like, yeah, okay, no thanks. So tell me how you're tackling that, and like what you think kind of other brands are missing. Like, I think you're right that the stereotype is wrong, but what is the or don't stereotype them, but what are you seeing too that like makes you think this is going to work?
So I think to make, look, and I know I sort of bashed out a load on an email to you in the early hours of one morning for quite, Jarrett quite frantically. To make a space cool for teenagers is just the same as making it cool for adults, right? You just make it cool. It's a really, again, like other things, like a really weird question. Like, if I said to you, I've made a bar, you wouldn't go, oh, how did you possibly make it cool? It's like, we all know how to make a bar cool, right? You put great drinks in there, you make the atmosphere brilliant, you design it thoughtfully, you put good seating in, then you put some good events on, you make sure your staff are bloody brilliant, make sure the music's good, right? And make sure it's on a decent street. I mean, it's not difficult. I think the challenge is for teenagers, people seem to think they need to design something different, right? And you don't. You just design a bar, and you don't put alcohol in it, like because that's what a cool social space is. And we have spent centuries and centuries and centuries getting really good at making cool social spaces. And there's one on every high street for people as soon as they turn 18, but just not when they're 17 and a half, apparently. So that's really easy. And you keep it cool, most importantly, by staying out of the way as older people, right? What teenagers desperately need and want is just to be left alone to dick about in the nicest possible way. And that's why the park ends up being quite cool, or shopping centres, because no one's watching over them. So as we design the space, we design it really carefully with sight lines at all times, so we can keep people safe, because that's really important. but absolutely no need for there to be adults, older adults, watching over the young people in our space. Right, it's their space. We man the bar, we man the front desk, we welcome our members, and we've got some CCTV that makes sure that nothing untoward is happening. But the space is their space, and they totally treat it as such. It's like the, I don't know. It's like the coolest mate you ever had with the coolest house, whose parents have gone away for the weekend and made the coolest house party.
Yeah, I just wanted to share, sharing up on screen your Instagram account, because it helps to kind of bring it to life, and it's very cool. Like I could definitely see Hudson, my 13-year-old son, wanting to check it out for sure.
I think it's worth also
It helps
saying,
if you have a very
and Cheryl
cool
and I have both
social
worked
media
on lots
manager
of
as well. That always helps. You could do more with social media than I knew possible.
Right.
Totally.
I think one of my questions is around, I think you set the stage, and I think you're absolutely right, in the UK, but also in the US, of what's happening. We used to, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, we had malls to go to, and that's what we did. So it's even before COVID, I think that these things transformed and changed and are no longer available. But I also think something that's happening, is most brands are saying, no, we actually don't want you. So we referenced Sephora opening up. My daughter, my almost 11-year-old daughter, is afraid to go into Sephora by herself because she's seen on the socials that they don't welcome her because, there's kids. And I'm sure this is happening, but, it's a choice, that are destroying the testers and kind of all of this and that. So most brands that kind of potentially have this opportunity, have this customer base, are not just not giving an opportunity, but actually shunning away. How do you see from a business standpoint, you're doing it to change the world, which, amazing, and there couldn't be a better reason to do anything, in my opinion. But how do you see it from a business standpoint that it's going to work?
Cheryl and I have spent a lot of our lives working on youth, working with youth brands and making, whether that's over here, whether that's Lucozade or PlayStation or Pot Noodle or EA Sports, or Axe. And so I think we're slightly bemused by the prevailing opinion that in some ways you can't have a commercial proposition that resonates with teenagers and is commercial enough. Those brands, who also does a lot of youth engagement to help lead those sessions, so that it's not led by two 40-something-year-olds that a room full of teenagers are looking slightly aghast at, and rightly so. And that process is an amazing process, right? And when you do that with them, they tell you all sorts of things that you didn't expect about what they want from a space, what they actually aesthetically where they're at. And it's far more mature than aesthetically where we were when we were teenagers. And I think when you do that and you trust them and empower them, I think it stands you in really good stead. And you end up creating something that genuinely they have ownership of, they're proud of, they want to go out and tell their friends about. And it's... So I think you create something that resonates with teenagers rather than is forced upon them. And I think that the flip side of this, Cheryl, when we've spoken to parents as well, you have to create something. Parents ultimately pay a subscription for this, and they have to cough up for this. And if you're going to cough up, then you better see the value in paying a monthly recurring subscription. But every parent we've spoken to and engaged on this says that the number one biggest concern they have is that their teenagers are cooped up in their bedrooms or swallowed up by social media, and they know they need independence. They know they need to let them out, but they're terrified of what's out there. So if they can find a safe and inspiring space that their teenagers gravitate to, then they're like, fine, I will pay you double for this. Just build it. And if they will come, then we will thank you profusely and pay with gratitude a monthly subscription, because that's incredible. So yeah, that's
100%.
how we've gone about it.
It's just from a marketeer's point of view, right? Because I realise that a lot of people listening to this will be thinking about commercial models and audiences. It's a very, very fundamentally, parents hold the purse strings. I hate to say it, but parents hold the purse strings quite often till people in their 20s now, because of the way the world has moved. So when I started, really years ago, parents held the purse strings till people were in their 16, 17, 18, when people started to be self-sufficient. Now, actually, they hold purse strings much later, and banking mum and dad is key. Absolutely, this is the same challenge that I faced 20 years ago on Pot Noodle. If anyone wants to go back to the Pot Noodle, had this campaign called the Slaggable Snacks. Absolutely brilliant campaign for teenagers. Pot Noodle ended up having to walk away from it because it was stopping parents opening their purse strings. So you have to walk a line where you create something which is totally engaging for teenagers, which won't alienate parents and make them go, no, I am not supportive of that. And that is the line that every single youth brand, whether it's PlayStation, it is parents paying for PlayStation, it is parents paying for Xboxes, it is parents paying for Nikes, so every single brand goes, I've got to be properly one with a teenage audience, but in a way that parents go, this is all right. This is all right. This is all right for me to open my purse strings for. And you have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And, I would 1000% pay whatever the fee is to have my child here. So please open one in LA very, very soon. Can you tell me a little bit, like, what's the journey look like? Ideally, it sounds like the kid is asking, hey, mom, dad, like, this seems like a rad place. Can you sign me up for this? Versus like me suggesting, hey, Hudson, there's a great club that I think you should partake in, which probably wouldn't fly that well. And then are they coming there weekly, daily? Like what's kind of that whole process look like?
Just love a rad place, by the way. Can we just have that? That is going in our story next week. A rad place for sure.
It's yours.
Paul, do you want to, John, or do you want me to?
Yeah, go on. You start. I've got a bit of a lag, so you start, and I'll jump in a slightly tardy fashion, no doubt.
So, the place was designed and built with a set of sort of what we call founding co-creators. So a set of teenagers helped us design and build the place, and we'll do that for every venue. So we'll always have a sort of founding group of teenagers, which instantly creates that noise and talkability, because those founding teenagers get discounted membership. So when the doors open, when we do open parties, those are the teenagers that are there. They bring some guests, and sort of off you go, and very quickly conversation starts to go around. It absolutely goes around the schools. It absolutely goes around the teenagers. So we sort of do this sort of double tracking where we kind of make sure we are aligned and involved in the parent community, and they know that we are Cheryl and Paul, and we are respectable sorts, and there is some grown-ups on site, and it's not a den of iniquity. But that is a sort of security blanket, because what really matters is the teenagers get into school and they talk about it, and it goes around on WhatsApp. And then what we see is those teenagers. Everyone's got a different pattern. Like some of our members are here like every day of the week at the same time after school, stay for an hour. Some members are down every Saturday. Sometimes you've got a big friendship group, and clearly this is now their Friday night. Some members come with a different guest every week. Some members come with the same two mates every time. So just like you, right? When everyone's got their different sort of social circles. And a big part of designing the space and the program was to really make sure it was inclusive. And everyone uses inclusive, right, in this way, which has got really loose and fat. We mean specifically that whatever sort of social space you need as a teenager, whether you need a quiet corner for a chat with a mate, whether you need just to feel like you can walk in the door on your own, right, and someone's going to give you a smile and a high five on a Friday afternoon, whether you want to turn up with 12 mates and have an absolutely banging time, or whether really you want to do a bit of creative reflection stuff, play a bit of chess. We've got all that in the space and programmed over the week. So we have as many teenagers turn up to do our Saturday afternoon movies and popcorn as we do for our what we call our FOMO Friday, which is our big Friday night, where we sort of get the tunes going and have a bit of an event, and it all gets a bit messy. So it's a genuinely inclusive and genuinely fits around all sorts of different teenagers, groups, patterns, and behaviours.
I love it.
Yeah, we had a great moment with last week. We had a parent who reached out to us and said, "I think what you're doing is amazing, and I'm just really trying to convince my teenager to come, because I think it sounds amazing." And we had to say, "Okay, in which case, can I strongly recommend you in no way try and convince your teenager to come, because if you want them to, that you're doing the one thing that will definitely convince them not to." And there was a real moment there. So I said, "With the best one in the world, please stop doing that, and we'll look forward to seeing them when they hear about it from their mates." And I think that's that's a really important way of trying to remember that it's got to come from teenagers, right? It's got to start there, and they've got to go. It's a great space, and I want to be a part of. It can't start from parents.
Right. Agreed with that. And okay, so I have a question for you. I'm Starbucks, right? Like I'm hearing this podcast. We actually have Starbucks CMO like as our readership. We've got a lot of cool people who listen to this podcast, right? But they're mostly CMOs running pretty big brands, and I'm writing to them on a regular basis, telling them on a regular basis, make alpha zones. There's an opportunity here. There's money here. That you should be doing this. What do you think is like? So I think that like Starbucks, for example, could take away their reserved cafes. I don't know if you've been to one of those, but they're like a fancy version of Starbucks, and make an alpha like one. Alpha loves Starbucks, but like also not like a place that they ever want to hang out. And it's not a place necessarily most people want to hang out sometimes. I think they're working on that, and they're doing a good job working on that. But what they're doing is not necessarily targeted at a big audience for them. And if this is something that they could do, like, what do you think if you're, as these like foremost experts in alpha, creation, what do you think that they should be doing?
I can tell you why they're not doing it.
Great.
And it's because, back to the original bit of this podcast, everyone is terrified of what teenagers will do and the impact it'll have on your brand experience to everyone else, right? Because they're loud and they're uncouth and they come in big groups and they're a funny size. Sometimes they're really big and sometimes they're really like, they are not what you want for your nice curated experience for mummies and babies and business people who are coming for a frappuccino, right? You don't want teenagers. They will jar if you've got a curated experience. So everyone runs from that. And they're unpredictable. And then if you're Starbucks as well, you just go, in the back of my mind all the time, I'm in a pound per square inch and a pound per minute. And I tell you what, teenagers, they take up a lot of inches and they hang around and and they don't spend anything like you want. So if you're Starbucks, I can totally see why they're backing off from it. If they wanted to lean into it, they need to create a properly liminal space, a space which is free of old people like us sitting on the Wi-Fi and where the music can be different and interesting, and where, most importantly, everything you do and say isn't tutted at and looked over by adults, because that's the experience of teenagers everywhere they go, and it's a miserable way to live.
Amen.
Yeah, indeed.
All right. Kirsten, you got some more
Rapid
questions?
fire? Yeah,
You
I'd love
ready
to
to
get
go
into
to
rapid fire if
fire?
we can do this.
All right. So we have 5 questions. Kirsten's got the questions in front of her, so she's going to rapid fire question you. And these are just going to be fun, like short answers, like tell us, like, things that come to mind. I'll open the floor to you and you can choose. Maybe you can take it in turns. Who answers one, you can start with one and the other person can go. But let's go for it.
Okay. Give us 3 things that you would tell alpha brands to do. Paul?
Number 1, just trust your audience. Listen to your audience and respect them as well. I think that would be my top 3 things.
Love that. Okay. In 30 years, no, maybe 100 years, what's the change that you want to make? What do you want to look back and say, we did this, or the world is now doing this because of what you've created? Cheryl?
So I think teenagers to be as connected with their community as every other part of society.
All right. If you could collaborate with another brand on something, who would it be and why? Paul?
Oh, there's a long list. I'm glad you got that one.
Give it here. We'll give some shout outs. We got some people listening. Never know.
That's a great question. Who I would love to collaborate with Supreme and create basically just a load of the coolest possible merch that we could have aimed at teenagers, but like that's absolutely focused on teenagers and teen culture. So that would be right up there at the top of my list. Cheryl, what about you?
I think probably a cutting edge food and drink brand, but I'm kind of turning my head going, I'm not sure quite which one. Like, because food and drink passes through so quickly, but you definitely would like a bubble tea brand or a chicken brand or something like that, which would add a lot of because they're hungry. We've got a partnership with Pizza Pilgrims, who are amazing, and that's bang on. So if you could find another brand as good as Pizza Pilgrims, although I'm not sure there is one as good as Pizza Pilgrims for teenagers, to be fair.
All right.
I love it.
If there was one celebrity spokesperson for the brand, who would it be?
Well, I think there's a bit of a it's not so who I would necessarily go, this is the perfect fit brand ambassador, but a brilliant spokesperson. Kate Winslet has already blazed a trail over this side of the pond and is a massive, I think, inspiration to us, and stood up when she picked up the BAFTA for I Am Ruth and said, we want our children back, and I implore either government or big tech to come in and sort this. And I definitely don't think either of those are. So, but she flies the flag brilliantly for this cause. So she'd definitely up there.
And I think, and I would add
Cheryl?
on the other side of our audience, on the more youth side, probably Ezra Collective, who over and over talk about the role that youth spaces, for them it's a youth club, but youth spaces have been in creativity and bringing them together, and they couldn't be more right in terms of an eclectic, diverse mix of incredibly creative people who have literally fought to make the world a very different place. To have jazz sitting where jazz is in music culture right now is amazing. So yeah, probably Ezra Collective.
Amazing.
Love it.
All right. Final question. One word that sums up your brand. Paul, you want to go first?
Sociable. I'll just go out there and go sociable.
Cheryl?
Yeah, well, I was going to say together, or togetherness, but I feel like it might be the same. Maybe we need something more loose. We might go loose.
Love it.
This has been such a pleasure. I'm so inspired personally and professionally. And truly, like, I wish this was here because my son desperately needs this so he is not running away from security guards with his e-bike in LA. So as soon as you can get over here, I'm ready.
Franchise
But I think
opportunity in LA.
every teenager still needs to be running away from security guards every now and then. Like,
Yeah.
I think there's one thing we would like to say is like, we are not here to mollycoddle or like wrap teenagers in cotton wool and like put them in this gilded cage. Like, teenagers still need to go and do dumb stuff and like take risks and all that stuff, you know, like, so it would be good if for some of the rest of the time there's another option for them.
Yes, it's a yes and for sure. He's not going to stop doing that.
They need a place to run to when they're running from the security guard, and that's Moot.
Love it. That's your new tagline.
You won't, because the security guard can't come in because teenage only space, so it's a secure space for that teenager. Run with that. Great.
Exactly. Where you can go when you're running from the police. Come here. No. Sure.
Again, I'm doing that and a rad brat. Like, we're in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. You guys are amazing. Thank you for coming on and letting us, pepper you with questions and being so open to talk. And I can't wait to see 100 of these like franchised all over the world. So, keep us posted on all the developments, and we're excited to share it with the world.
And thank you for reaching out,
having
Christian.
us.
This has been brilliant.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so fun. Bye, all.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
That was it for this episode of Good Thinking. Don't forget to tune in next week.
If you found this valuable, subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast app.
And don't forget to read on Substack for even more insights.
And if you really liked it, drop us a heart. We'd love to hear from you.
Ciao. Until next time.